أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Yes, my professionals, how are you? I hope you are doing well. So today we are going to study verses from 21 till 29 in Surah Baqarah. In these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates some arguments which are very important, which we must study, that how Allah explains that how Allah created the universe, the land, earth, and the sky, and Allah provided us provision for our you know usage. So Allah says that He is the only one who created you, O humanity. He is talking to us, right? He has created us and the people before us. Like if you start from verse 21, Allah says that Allah speaks to humanity, that, O humanity, worship only your Lord, worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you can see only verse number 21. So Allah speaks to the humanity and Allah says that, O humanity, just worship your Lord because He is the one who created you and people before you, right? So Allah says that worship Allah so that you become muttaqi, you become righteous, you become believer. So this is very important. The only way Allah describes in the Holy Quran is if you want to become righteous, if you want to become believer, if you want to become muttaqeen, Allah says the only way is to worship me. So worship Allah means that we have to follow His commandments, which are clearly mentioned in Holy Quran. So we have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to read Quran Pak. We have to study it. We have to understand what Allah is teaching us in true meanings. This is the only way that we can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by doing His worship, we can become righteous. This is the only way, right? And yes, the question is why we should not worship Him, because He created us. He created all the human before us. And in verse 22, Allah says that الذي جعل لكم الأرض فراشا والسماء بناء. So Allah says, why don't you worship me? Allah says, I am the one who created the earth, right? In verse 22, Allah says, I created the earth, I created the sky as a canopy for you, right? And I sent down rain from the sky, and that rain leads to the production of fruits and provision for you. And Allah says, I made the earth a resting place. So these are the blessings which Allah explains in verse 22. So why we should not worship Him? So Allah created us, the people before us. Allah created the earth, the heavens, skies, and Allah sent rain down to the earth and bring us provision, fruits. So we must pay our thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we must worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then in verse 23, Allah put us on a challenge. This is a wonderful verse. Allah says that if you have doubt, O humanity, if you have doubt that this Quran, and as I've told you before, that this Quran is the only way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm repeating this sentence again. If we claim that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the only way is to follow the Quran. If you are not following the Quran, it means you are not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever you are doing. The only way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to obey Quran. That is why Allah says that if you have doubt in this Quran, which is revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so Allah says, then produce one single surah like this and call all your helpers beside Allah if you are true in your claim. So Allah says that if you say that this Quran is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the Quran which is revealed to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah says that then produce one single surah like this and call everyone for help beside Allah if you are true in your claim. And Allah says further in 24 that if you cannot fulfill your claim and you can never fulfill it, then prepare for the fire that will be available in Jahannam. And so fear the fire which is fueled with people, stones prepared for disbelievers. So if you disbelieve that this Quran is not from Allah, or if you do not follow Quran to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then prepare for the fire, which is fueled by with people and stone in Jahannam. And this is the place for the disbelievers. So after 24 verse, in verse number 25, if you can see here, Allah says that, oh yes, and for the and oh Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam give good news to the believers, because believers and the righteous people, they will be they will live in Jannah, right? And Jannah is a place the rivers are flowing under them, and they will be given provision, fruits. They will have purified wives, and they abide forever in Jannah. This is the blessings for the believers, for the muttaqeen, who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who follow Quran and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Quran, because Quran is the only way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After 25 verse, Allah just moved to verse number 26, and that is wonderful. Allah says that, yes, Allah never, feel shy, even mentioning mosquito as an example. So when Allah gives this simple example, the people who believe, they say, yes, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously we believe in that, because whatever Allah is talking in Quran, whatever Allah is mentioning, that is with a definite reason. But the fasiqeen and the kuffar and the non-believers, they say that, what does Allah mean to mention this example in the Holy Quran? So they argue in this way. So Allah says that from the simple test, by mentioning a simple example of a mosquito, Allah says, I guide believers and I leave astray the fasiqeen. Yudillu bihi kathiran wa yahdi bi kasira wa ma yudillu bihi illa al-fasiqeen. Allah says, I only leave to stray those people who are fasiqeen. And who are fasiqeen? Allah says in verse number 27, Allah says, fasiq, they are the true losers. First of all, they are the true losers, and they have 3 or 4 signs. The first one is they violate Allah's promise, right? They violates Allah covenant after strong affirmation. Number 2, they break ties, they discontinue relationship with their relatives, which Allah actually orders in Quran to build relationship with your relatives, and they break those ties and they cause corruption in the land, right? So Allah says these are the qualities. So not qualities, right? These are the characteristics of fasiqeen. So if we are believers, then we must fulfill all those covenant which we make with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we will follow Quran, we will offer prayer, we will give zakat, we will have strong belief in hereafter, and we must have a good relationship with our relatives, and we must not cause corruption in the land, right? So Allah says that how can these fasiqin deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because Allah has the perfect knowledge. Allah gives them life. Allah cause you die. Allah bring you again towards life. And Allah has created everything. So in these verses from 21 to 29, I've created this research model so that we can find that everything is linked to each other. Like if you just click this humanity, then everything which is related to humanity explained here. And these are the qualities of fasiqin. You can clearly see here. And the example of mosquito is basically a simple test that has been given in Quran to clarify who is believer and non-believer. So you can see the believer will believe by analyzing that example that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Fasiq will argue that what is the meaning of mentioning the example of mosquito in Quran. So this is the simple test. Through this simple test, Allah will clearly qualifies the characteristics of believers and non-believers. So this is all about we discussed for Surah Baqarah verses from 21 to 29. Inshallah, for the next lesson, wait for my new video, right? Thank you. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli.